Hello and welcome.
Hello.
We're psyched to be your first panel of the morning. Let's wake up. Woo! And we're talking about power with an extremely powerful woman. I'll just give you a quick little two-line bio because I really think you should know her. She's a mom, she's a congresswoman, she's the head of the DNC. This is one of the most powerful women in American government right now. So, snaps, right? We're going to talk about her first run for office when she was in her early 20s. But this panel is how the feminine factor makes for more effective government. And that's my first question to you. We see research from politics, from business, coming from different sectors about how women do things a little better, right? We're getting different results, we're more transparent, we bring more people into the fold. But Congress is a hyper-partisan place right now. So what does this feminine factor look like in Congress in 2015?
So, first of all, just to back up for 1 second, it is fantastic to be here for the She Summit and to be at the 92nd Street Y, where I pretty much grew up watching my dad play handball. My image of the 92nd Street Y is sweat and the swimming pool. And I've been on the stage many times. It's wonderful to be here in the daytime, actually, because usually I'm here at night, and I launched my book here, and so it's really neat to be here. And I'm a New Yorker through and through. I represent Florida now, but you can take the girl out of New York. You can never really take the New York out of the girl. So it's great to be here with you. But I want to also say something about power before I answer your question.
Great.
Because there weren't very many applause for the way you introduced me, because women seem to have some kind of an issue with the notion of power, or too many women do. Power, in terms of the way you think about it and what you do with it, is a very significant and important thing. But women end up being raised to believe that somehow power is something distasteful, or that it's not a good idea to strive to achieve. Power, depending on what you do with it, can be and should be incredibly constructive and useful. And it's why I initially wanted to run for office, because I didn't see, and I know you're going to ask, I think we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but when I ran for the state legislature when I was 25 years old, there was no one that looked like me. And so the issues that were rising to the top of the state legislative agenda were not the priorities of young women. There were no women in their 20s at the time. And so what you're asking about the feminization of power, how you get things done and why it's so important for women to get involved is really important, because with more women serving in Congress than ever before, we have 104 women in Congress now, although it's still only 19% of the whole Congress. So one day I want to not have to say, we've made a lot of progress, but we still have a long way to go. That's what the hashtag is about. But there are so many issues that would never reach the national agenda if not for our presence. And quite frankly, because of the way women make decisions and our desire to reach consensus. And we shouldn't misunderstand consensus to mean appeasement, or to mean that we just roll over and agree to say yes because we're women.
Do you think women are more comfortable using the word leadership instead of power, or influence instead of power?
I think women should just embrace power.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just, because the idea is that you should be able to attain power so that you can use it constructively and as a force for good. And the more of us, because we are much more responsible generally in the way we use power, it is so important for us to embrace it and for us to encourage younger women. I mean, I have two daughters, a 16-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old daughter. And my husband and I are raising them to understand that their knowledge is power, that working together and networking is a form of power, and that it is a positive thing. But too many little girls grow up thinking that power is a bad thing, and that's not something, and that it's not feminine. It's incredibly feminine to be a powerful advocate for the issues that matter to you, to your family, to your community. And through community is how so many women come up and eventually decide to run for office.
I want to actually stay on this let's hold on the sort of what does that look like in Congress. The idea of sort of being the number two instead of being the number one. And when you actually were first elected, you were a staff member of the previous representative in the Florida State Legislature. What was that transition like to go from behind the scenes to then being the front person, to being the candidate, to being responsible?
So I knew probably my freshman year of college that I wanted to run for office. Prior to that, I had a completely different pathway that I envisioned. But I thought that I would run for office years down the road, take the path that women normally take, which is, get married, have kids. When your kids are a little older and more independent, then you can focus on your own professional goals. But I had this opportunity at 25 years old. Thankfully, my predecessor in the legislature, who was also my predecessor in Congress, some of you may know him, Peter Deutsch, he encouraged me because he knew I wanted to run.
Right.
So he saw an opportunity during the redistricting in 1992 for me to run, when it was a very good opportunity, an open seat. And he said, look, I'll find someone else to run my congressional campaign, which is what I was planning to do.
Right.
You should run now. You need to seize this moment. You're at a stage in your life where there's every opportunity for you to grab this. It's not a sure thing.
Right.
But you have the
odds.
ability to take the risk now. We had just gotten married. My husband and I were married for a year. We had just bought our first house. We didn't have kids yet. But in terms of risk-taking, he was right. I was at the stage in my life where probably losing would have been the least impactful on my life. Whereas now, 22 years later, with 3 kids and lots of other things going on and obligations, it's much harder to make a very risky decision.
And having just been married and knowing that kids were on the agenda, and you ended up having twins, and then another daughter, and you're in the legislature, your ambitions are for somewhat higher office. How did you make those decisions? What were the conversations you had with your partner? How did that what did it look like?
So when I ran, I really wasn't thinking 10 steps ahead of where, and I still don't today, of where I'm going to go next. I really just want to focus on the work I'm doing now, on why I'm doing it. And, so for women, which is what I find with so many of my colleagues, and quite frankly with community activists, getting a woman, and I've been involved, obviously in my party role, I'm involved in trying to recruit women to run. Getting a woman over that hump to decide to run is so much harder than convincing a man.
Yes.
Men sort of automatically self-recruit. They immediately think, of course I'm the most qualified person.
And they see themselves out there.
Yes.
So that when they look out into the political field.
Naturally, I'm the logical choice, a man says to himself. But women give us every reason in the world why it's too hard, and they just can't. And in fact, and I'm not talking out of school because Kirsten has told this story publicly. Kirsten Gillibrand, who is one of my closest friends, called me when she was considering running for the State House. We're we're literally 2 weeks apart in age, and we're at the same stage in terms of mothering. And she called, and we talked about, because I already had, I was in Congress and had kids. She said, how are you doing it? And she wanted to have more kids, so we talked through mostly, how I was balancing work and family while serving in Congress, and if she had a tough race, what was she doing? How could she get her husband engaged? Her husband Jonathan's fantastic, like my husband Steve, but not every husband is.
Yeah.
Erin, let me tell you, I've had so many conversations. I know that's going to come as a shock. Every husband is not amazing in terms of equal parenting and getting involved and being supportive. But when that's a huge consideration for women. I have actually tried to recruit women to run for Congress who ultimately had to decide against it because they just couldn't get their husband to the point mentally where they were going to have to step up and fill in all the blanks of daily life, and even if it was for a short period, just to get them across the finish line.
Right.
So that's always heartbreaking when a woman wants to run, and how amazing she'd be, and so it's I think important for women to have this conversation. It's like a big untalked about thing where. Right. So many times, the men in our lives are an obstacle to are being able to make decisions to advance our own professional goals.
Right.
And so we've got to raise our boys, as I'm raising my son, to understand that, you know, it is 50% their responsibility to take care of kids, to make sure the house is functioning, to make sure that, that you know, we are all, and I will say, it is 50% no matter what combination of parenting you're doing. You know, men and men, women and women, but we have to be, the family unit has to be supportive of one another. It is not only one parent's responsibility.
Yes, and we need more role models like this. We just put something out on Monday.
See, Steve Schultz should be on this stage, not me.
Yes, we're Steve Schultz, right? And to give that kind of role model for men about what that looks like, we put something out. City Treasurer Tashara Jones of St. Louis, who is really helping to turn around that city, did a post about how she was in the legislature with a small child. And then on my Facebook page, it was like, oh, remember when I took this little guy to work, and it's my friend's son on the Amtrak, and then it's State Representative Faith Winter, her picture of her kids, and his answer on a test, it was something like, there are 10 boys on this soccer team and they need 2 more girls. And his answer was, there are not enough girls on your soccer team. And she posts that on the, you know, it's just this, how are we raising the next generation of boys so that we can have all that we want?
So young women, whenever I speak to young women, so often they will say to me, you know, I want to have a full professional life and a full family life, and I don't want to have to compromise, but I just don't see how you can have it all. And I'll go through, and we were just talking about this, I'll go through and I'll explain, you know, what I did, the internships, that kind of stuff, towards my professional goals, and that in my mind, it was never, you know, a thought that I wouldn't have a family and try to balance it. The only thing that I have said to women so often is, I can't give you advice on how to meet a great guy like Steve Schultz, because that is, and you can have it all. This raging debate over whether you can have it all or you can't have it all. Of course you can, as long as you don't define all, as so many women do, as being perfect. Because we are so hard on ourselves. It's insane. Don't pop over to my house right now unexpectedly and expect it to be neat as a pin. It isn't, because we're living. But so many women freak out that, you know, unless when they get home after a long, hard day at work and, you know, trying to make sure that everything is right in the world with their kids, which is both in the top responsibilities, oh my God, I've got to do the laundry and clean the house and make sure that everything is absolutely perfect. I lean on my friends. My parents live down the street. They lean on me. We're there for each other. You have to create a network. Like Hillary said, it takes a village. It totally takes a village.
Yeah, we like to call it a kitchen cabinet. It's like, if you open up this, you know, who's doing your laundry? If you open up this, who's feeding your kids? If you open up this, you know, it's sort of having all those...
from the topic.
No, it's okay. I think this is, we want to talk about this. Okay, let's imagine that we've raised a bunch of feminist boys, that women are 50%, let's say 60, right? 60% of all the state legislatures of Congress. What does the world look like? What changes, you know, we're talking about 2030. Let's make it happen. Vote Run Lead wants to make it happen in 15 years. What does the world look like? What's different?
So what's different is the national conversation changes. I mean, I can only use myself as an example, but the issues that I was able to bring to the floor of the House of Representatives as a young woman, I passed the first federal pool safety legislation. There had never been any member of Congress that introduced legislation to address the epidemic of child drowning. The #1 killer of children under 5 years old in Florida is drowning in residential pools. It's the #2 killer of children through accidental death nationally, of children under 14 years old. And now there's a federal pool safety legislation. When I had breast cancer, I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 41. I found the lump myself. You know, but when I was trying to find the niche issue that had not been addressed in the myriad of issues related to breast cancer, focusing on young women and making sure that young women were able to pay attention to their breast health, that was an unaddressed issue. So I introduced the Early Act and worked and reached across the aisle. And this is an important thing, Erin, is that women are much more likely to reach across the aisle and work together and put aside, you know, the bigger partisan differences. Each major piece of legislation that I passed, whether it was the Early Act or the Rape Survivor Child Custody Act, there is, Renee Elmers and I passed legislation related to breast cancer. Tom Marino and I passed this Rape Survivor Child Custody Act, which actually was featured on The Daily Show a few months ago, because we discovered that there are women who are victims of rape. And after being raped, they get sometimes, very often, they get much more often than you think they get pregnant. Then they are re-victimized so often by their attacker, who goes after child custody or visitation, and often hangs it over their head to try to prevent them from pursuing prosecution.
Right.
And women, before this law passed, were not able to, in many states, terminate the parental rights of their attacker. So this, I know. So I couldn't believe it either. So I remember asking, is this really a thing?
Right.
And it is a thing beyond your wildest imagination. So we incentivized states through additional resources that they can get through criminal justice funding and domestic violence funding to change their laws so that women can petition through clear and convincing evidence to terminate those parental rights. Without women, thank you, and it's law now. But without a woman, without a woman initiating that legislation at the federal level, it likely wouldn't have happened or happened for years.
And we have 30 years of research on this that says women put a different kind of policy agenda forward. Absolutely. We also have research about the process. Tell us about the process and how women in Congress are, the kind of lifeline right now, it seems like, of sanity at the federal level.
It's really true. I'll take you back to the government shutdown from a year and a half ago.
Yes.
The 20 women in the Senate were largely credited with jump-starting the conversation that finally ended that madness. It cost our economy $24 billion, but women on both sides of the aisle came together and said, look, we got to sort this out. We can't this stalemate has to end. When it came to the Violence Against Women Act, it was women on both sides of the aisle that finally, after 2 years of trying to get it reauthorized, came together and said, we're going to put our votes together and we're going to draw a line in the sand and insist that this happen.
Right.
We've had numerous, when it came to the 20-week abortion ban bill that came up in the very beginning of this Congress, it was the women Republicans. It's hard for me to give credit to
Renee. It was right.
Yeah, it was Renee Elmers, my friend from North Carolina, who's partnered with me on a lot of issues. But she and several of her Republican colleagues, women colleagues, said, "We're not voting for this," and they were going to come to the floor and speak against it, and the bill was pulled. Now, unfortunately, they just passed it a few weeks ago instead, but not without some changes being forced. Right. And so we are just much more likely to not dig in and insist on everything being our way. And women are much more likely to try to get to yes rather than to get to their version of yes.
Yeah. So how do we do it? We've got just a few minutes left. We need, we have been stuck at this sort of 18, 19, 17%, right? There are 550,000 local seats across this country. 435 of them are in Congress.
Yes.
So how do we get, and we're working at this every day at Vote Run Lead, how do we get more women to say, hey, I want my entrepreneurship, I want my leadership to be in the civic space, whether it's as the candidate or at the community level? What is it going to take? Is it the asking? Tell me.
Yes, women have to be asked more often.
Yep.
Because in too many open seat situations or when there is a natural choice for a leader, too often it is not the woman community activist that is first thought of, even by women, unfortunately. Yep. So we women have to be a sisterhood. The sisterhood is important. We really have to lean on one another. So try hard to get past, if you're not already thinking this way, to get past your unfortunate natural inclination to think of a man immediately for a leadership role, and make an effort to sit down and talk another woman into making that difficult decision to run, to take a leadership role in a community organization. We have to build the bench. We have to reach behind us, each as women who have achieved something, and think about, I try to always replace myself from the rung of the ladder I just left with another woman. All things being equal, when it comes to building my team, I try to make sure that I have a good, strong opportunity for women candidates for the positions that I have open. I have some great men. I've got one of them here with me, my press secretary, but it is really important because there are so many more opportunities for men. Right. So we have to create those opportunities for one another. And you have to think of yourself as being available for a leadership position. Self-recruit.
Yeah.
Men do it all the time.
Yep, absolutely. All right. We've just got under a minute left. You have 2 daughters. How do we get them excited about using their voice?
You have to keep in mind that every girl is not made the same way. It would probably surprise you to learn that, one of my daughters is really not interested in the spotlight. She's not interested in running for office in the future. She's only 12, so she's got some time. I'm hoping to persuade her otherwise. But she does understand that she has strength. She does understand that her opinion matters. She's not afraid to raise her hand in class, and it starts there. I mean, we have, and I can't cite the statistics, but there's a lot of evidence out there through studies. I'm sure your organization has used them, where girls, as they get older in school, are much more likely to raise their hand and answer a question. They're more likely to assume that they're wrong, and so they're afraid to be wrong. And I've been wrong plenty of times, and sometimes been wrong out loud. But we have to give our girls more confidence, and we have to encourage younger women and women that we have identified personally as having potential to push themselves out there. And the other thing that's so important is being competitive is a positive thing. We have to look at it that way, but we have to. Too often, women are our own worst enemies. The generation before us, I have so much admiration for them, and the women who built the women's movement made it possible for me to even think about running for office when I was 25 years old, and so I give them so much credit. But sometimes because those women had to work so hard and use so much of their own individual moxie, that they are not necessarily, and this isn't just older women, but they're not necessarily so encouraging of younger women being able to step up as well. Thinking, I made it on my own, she should have to make it on her own. We all need to stick together. We need to lift each other up, and we need to make sure that we understand that on this big stage here, there is room for a lot of us, and we're going to get a lot more done. You can see it just in the way things are getting done, the more women's voices and the more women's votes that we put together. And you all need to look at yourselves as powerful as a group, as a gender, as a movement that has an ability to push things. One day, we didn't talk about gun violence, but we will be able to address gun violence much more effectively if the women of this country band together and overwhelm and overpower the NRA, which we have the ability to do. We just have to step up and make the commitment.
All right. I want to thank you all for listening, and I want to charge you with one action, and that is to think of one woman in your life who should run for office. And before you leave today, I want you to email her, tweet her, Facebook her, and say, I think you should run for office.
Which means some of you might be emailing yourselves.
Yes. And then get her connected to Vote Run Lead, and we will make it happen. Thank you so much,
Thank
Congresswoman
you.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Hi, I'm Claudia Chan, and I'm the founder of She Summit. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with your friends and community. At She Summit, we believe there is a leader and change agent inside everyone, and our goal is to unleash you to lead change from where you are for issues that you care about to benefit your life, your family, your workplace, and even the world. There's so many ways to follow us if you're interested in this leadership content. You can actually subscribe to this YouTube channel, of course, but also visit our website where you can sign up for our newsletter and learn more about our community, new leadership courses that we're rolling out, and our 2019 She Summit conference. And I also just launched a podcast based on my book. It's called the How We Rise Leadership Podcast. So please follow us. There's so many ways to follow us. And I'm so excited for you to join our new generation of leaders to lead change again for our lives and for the world.